And so both Ambedkar and Periyar were excellent feminists of their time because they never looked away from the women question. And they never looked away from the fact that this women question was innately tied to the religion question.
Lights, Camera, Azadi is a show that is on a quest to meet personalities. The personalities who have always challenged the status quo. These people are courageous and confident to speak the truth and are best at it. Though the world may or may not agree with them, they always work for nation building. We want to talk to them and understand their perspective. We want to know their worldview, their thoughts, and what gaps do they see in the society, and most importantly, how to live life fearlessly. My name is Vandit Jain, and I am just a medium to get these stories to you.
Hi everyone, welcome to the 40th episode of Lights Camera Azadi, and what a special episode. We have Dr. Meena Kandasamy with us, a prominent voice of dissent in a political discourse. She's a poet, writer, translator, activist, and she hails from Chennai. To be honest, I was really lucky to have her. We connected over email and she instantly agreed, and we finally recorded on 9th May. In this episode, we take the discourse forward and we talk about many caste atrocities and injustice that has happened in the past and are existingly happening. We talk about and we make a commentary on the existing political climate of India uh, and our positions around it. Dr. Meena's life and a very important topic known as the Bhima Koregaon case. I hope all of you enjoy the episode. Uh, and yeah, we are now on Ghana app, by the way. And if you're listening on Spotify, please hit follow. And if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe. If you're on Instagram, do like us. And yes, now let us meet on Clubhouse someday, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, yeah, I know many of you are now on Clubhouse. I have been too, but I am now more active. So let us connect one day. And yes, without wasting any time, presenting to you Dr. Meena Kandasamy.
This episode is brought to you by Miva Naturals. Miva is a homemade brand dedicated to your personal care experience. Miva make products with dedication, love, and with a touch of nature. They don't use any chemicals or harmful substances in their products to ensure you get the best feeling which is long lasting. Miva makes products which are colorful and are fun to use, and it aims to be your best experience in the whole day. If you'd like to order your first Miva product, please go to miva.co.in and insert the code AZADI during checkout and get instant 20% off. So, what are you waiting for? Hi all. Lights Camera Azadi is a year old now. While I do this effort part-time and after office hours and on weekends, the truth is, I haven't made any money out of it. If you think what I do is worth it, it adds value in your existing knowledge base, and you want me to continue doing this, I request you to please support me for an episode that you like. You can go to patreon.com/azadi and make any contribution, big or small, of your choice. To just make a one-time contribution, cancel the charges after you have paid. Your small contribution can go a long way in my endeavor to bring stories to you. So 3, 2, 1, Dr. Meena Kandasamy, welcome to Lights Camera Azadi.
Hello, and thank you for having me on your show. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Pleasure is all mine. I'm so excited for this conversation. We have been trying to do this for a while now, and finally we made it.
Yes, it's my delay, but
No
I'm finally
problem.
happy to be here. Thank you.
Yes, and how is everything at your end? How are you? And it's pandemic time. I hope you and your loved ones are safe.
So far, yes, but we're also very worried, how the lockdown kind of throws our life up in the air. So we have enough 14 days lockdown going on from tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, all right. Dr. Meena, the first question I have for you is what chain of events happened that you became a writer? What is the story and the journey behind it?
I have not often thought about this very self mythology terms, but I think a lot of it actually started because of who my parents were and how Tamil Nadu was in the 90s and early 2000s. So my parents have had an anti-caste marriage. My father belongs to a nomadic tribal community and my mother belongs to a Shudra community, and they had like an anti-caste, intercaste marriage in the early 80s. And when I was a little kid, my mom was working in the IIT Madras, and I never understood the relevance of, I understood what she was fighting about. Like in 1996, she went to court saying that, the Mandal Commission recommendations for backward classes in employment should be implemented at the faculty level. So you should have professors, associate professors, and other assistant professors from the backward classes. And she went to court in 96, so I was still in school. My mom was working. She was the only breadwinner for the family. So my father and I used to go and meet a lot of lawyers and try to, see what's happening with mom's case. I was really young then, 12 or 13, but I could still, write English fluently and take down notes and, like help with the preparation of her affidavits. So in that sense, I really got like, into a habit of writing, reading, but also reading some of her legal stuff. But all of these lawyers that I happened to meet happened to, have a lot of books with them and, would just borrow out books for me. And also, it was not only a legal struggle, it was also, I think, a kind of political struggle, because a lot of political organizations like Periyarist organizations or the Vidudalai Chiruthakal Katchi, that's the Liberation Panthers, all of these Ambedkarite and Periyarist movements were very much in favor of, reservation at the IITs. So I happened to meet all of these people as well. So I think it was growing up, in this certain radicalized pro-reservation, pro-social justice. You realize that, there's a lot that you want to say. And also, I think it was coupled with this complete frustration about academics, because my mom was hugely talented and intelligent, and because of her caste location as a Shudra woman, she couldn't do much. And within an IIT, which is a very Brahminical system. And my father, who was like a first generation learner, his parents were illiterate, and the first person in the school in this village to finish school or college or university. And then I saw like these are really brilliant people, but their life is wasted, and just lost within academia, which is such a profoundly caste space. So I decided when I finish school, I'm not going to get educated. I'm going to start writing or doing translations and stuff. So that's how my journey started. So first I was a translator, and then I came into writing my own stuff. Sorry for a very long answer.
No, no. I think the answer should be long. So yeah, so that's the trait of a good podcast when the guests are having a very long descriptive answers. So Dr. Meena, and like tell me the first your first piece of novel that you did, and what was your inspiration behind it?
My first novel, actually, my first novel was published in 2014, but that was literally like 11 years after my first book was published. So, my first book was this translation of the writings. The writings and speeches of Tamil leader Tol Tirumavalavan. He's a parliamentarian, and he also is the founder president of the Vidudalai Chiruthaigal Katchi, which means Liberation Panthers Party, and they stand for caste annihilation and women's liberation and many of these things. So I first translated his speeches as a book. That book was published in 2003 by
Wow.
Sri Samya. I think, yeah, I was 19 at that time. And then, yeah, it was called Talisman, Extreme Emotions of Dalit Liberation. And then the next book was, called Uproot Hindutva. The fiery,
Okay.
and the subtitle was The Fiery Voice of the Liberation Panthers. And sometimes I really think like this was published in 2004. That's like literally 17 years ago. People in Tamil Nadu were already saying Uproot Hindutva, like the rest of India is waking up to it so slowly. But yeah, it took me literally 10 years from then to actually publish a novel, because in the middle I was writing a lot of poetry. And so, I had two books of poetry after that. And I also translated Periyar in 2007. But for my novel, it took me a long time to write it, Vandit, because, I got obsessed about one story that I had to somehow get it out. And I had to get it all the, like factual, not only factually right, but also to get the fictional universe right as much as possible. So it took me like 6-7 years of research to like research and writing to put the book together. So yeah, I let it come when it was going to come. I was not in a hurry to have my novel out there.
Hmm. And what was the story? Is this the one about uh, the gypsy goddess? It is
This was the Gypsy Goddess. Yeah, this was the one.
Kilvenmani Massacre.
Yes, it is about the Kilvenmani Massacre. So it's very interesting, in terms of there are two ways of looking at it. In one way, you could just say, 44 Dalit men, women, and children were killed in 1968 by caste Hindu landlords in the East Tanjore district in the village of Kilvenmani. But that's just one perspective. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
the other story is that this is how cruel caste feudalism is, this is how relentless it is. But the other story that needs to be told is the story of Dalit militancy. It's a story of organized workers. It's a story of what communism and Marxism was doing in the Tanjore area. It's a question of how agricultural laborers, especially an entire Dalit village in Kilvenmani, stood up against the most vicious landlords, and they were like the forefront of. Leading the communist struggle in India. Like these are the only people who laid down their lives, because they believed in, let's say, the red flag. They believed in communism. They believed in their rights as workers. They believed in, the power of the strike. They believed in unity. And so for me, the whole question is, don't look at this as like victims. Look at this as one of the most important lessons in resilience, the lessons in hitting back, lessons in a struggle that's written, history written in blood, but also a history of revolution. Because you go to school and then these are not the stories that you read about. You don't read about how vicious feudalism is, how vicious caste system is, how vicious the state machinery is. And also you don't understand how much people have fought back. So for me, this was like this very important story that had to be told. So also what happens later is that all the landlords are let away by the court, the Madras High Court, which says that these are people who own lands, these are people who drive a car, they're like so gentlemen, blah blah. So we can't put these people, we can't believe that they did these murders themselves. And so they're just kind of exonerated and don't have to spend time in jail. Nobody's given a death sentence, nobody's even given like kind of prison sentence. And then you realize that the justice delivery mechanisms completely failed them. But then again, this is not the story of Kilvenmani alone, because the same thing happens in Bathanitola, it happens in Laxmanpur Bathe. It happens wherever there is a Dalit massacre around the country. The justice mechanism just completely gives them away. And then but here in Venmani is very interesting because the people just don't give it up like that. Eventually there is revenge. Eventually, the people have to do what the state refuses to do or the state doesn't do. So I think in that sense also it's a very uplifting story of militancy and resistance and retributive justice. So I kind of like that story, and yeah. And also, I think the personal aspect of the story is my father comes from Tanjore. He comes from a landless family of, his mother has worked as an agricultural laborer. So I think, for me, it was a story that was so close to home as well in so many aspects, even though I had a very urban childhood. I think for me, what does it mean to have hunger in childhood? These are stories that, I just learned from my father. And for me, these are stories that are really worth telling.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, there are not many agitations like Kilvenmani agitation that we hear about, especially communist agitations in the country. But also, Dr. Meena, I was curious that how has Tamil Nadu changed in all these years? It comes across to the remaining part of India as literate and progressive and modern. But has the situation changed a bit, or is it still more or less the same?
Well, I do think that, subsequent governments, this was 1968, I do think the subsequent governments did take a certain interest in trying to, fix land ceiling or trying to give more rights to agricultural workers and, institute more tribunals and just kind of the kind of viciousness with which bonded laborers or landless workers were treated has completely changed. But what has also changed is the nature of agriculture itself. There's so much migration that, who is doing agriculture now, who is left to do agriculture. So much of it is no longer even tied to place because people are just subcontracting, farming itself. So I think there's so much that's, ups and downs that are going down there. But I do think that the sheer brutality of Venmani hasn't necessarily been repeated on the in terms of just merely agriculture. On the other hand, I do think that Tamil Nadu is very rife with caste atrocities. So, like in the first 3 months of the lockdown, you had more than 81 cases of atrocities only in Tamil Nadu, and including about more than 20 murders of Dalit people. So, I do think that, caste atrocities are really rampant here.
Hmm.
Perhaps they are everywhere, and but just that in Tamil Nadu, some of it manages to reach the mainstream and it reaches news and other stuff. So I do think that things have changed, but I also things have changed in terms of how, like Dalits are right now, I think, are really vocal across the political spectrum. It doesn't only
Hmm.
have to be the communists who talk about their rights. Like Dalits have their own organizations, they have their own parties, but also, it's important for every party to address issues because of Dalits, because they form like a fifth of Tamil Nadu's population, and also, coming in line with rising Ambedkarite consciousness
Yeah,
and this
yeah.
understanding, Periyar's work, it just becomes so much more important to address issues of, caste and wage and labor and, representation, I think. So,
And when you were talking about the culprits of the uh, Kilvenmani Massacre, I was recalling an episode that I did with two amazing lawyers, Disha and Nikita, and it was about the casteism of the criminal justice system,
mm-hmm.
and there was this point that we were discussing that how any caste atrocities would happen, and the courts would just refuse to at least not even treat it under the STSC acts. And at the same point in time, there would be a very open bias would come into play, where they would say, like in this particular case, where if people are gentlemen, they're riding cars and they are well groomed, polished, having those kind of aesthetics, then they would, they would just not allow them. They would just ensure that the whole machinery would act in a way that they would ensure that they don't end up in jail. And
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
I know about that because actually, I think a couple of years ago, it's possibly 2015, if I'm not wrong. I did a speech. It was the Dr. Anuradha Gandhi Memorial Lecture. So I was giving this at the Mumbai Press Club, and so I spoke on this topic called "No One Kills the Dalits," and it was
Hmm.
about what has happened in terms of Dalit massacres and how has the legal system worked. So I was looking at Batanitola, Laxmanpur Bathe, I was looking at Shindur, I was looking at Kilvenmani, of course, and I was looking at
Kherlanji.
Kherlanji. No, Kherlanji, yes, of course, that too, because Anand has written a book on it, Untitled Chapter. So I was looking at all of these and, trying to say, how does the system give excuses? So it says,
Yeah.
it says, oh, you were seeing, your wife killed in front of your eyes, but why did you take a 24-hour delay? Like, this person has basically witnessed the most traumatic incident in his life. Like, of course there would be a delay, like first they have to save their life, and then just the fact that there was a crucial delay in filing the FIR would lead to a legitimate, the court would legitimize that delay and use that as an excuse to even throw the case out. So, or somebody would say, oh, you say you were hiding behind something and it was really dark, but how were you able to witness that so many things happened? So the fact that one is that a lot of witnesses were made to turn hostile because they still have to go, live in these tiny villages. So there's so many
Yeah.
cases that are thrown out because of hostile witnesses, and so many cases that are thrown out because if it's very descriptive, they say it's very descriptive. How can it be so descriptive? And there are no facts there. Like there's no facts, so you cannot ascertain the identity. So you're like, they basically the system works so hard, and it's right from the police levels until like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
high courts. It's very. I think we need an overhaul. We need more young advocates talking about that kind of thing.
Correct, correct. Yeah, and it begins from that first report, the first information report, that first FIR, then the police system,
Oh,
and
the
then
police system does everything in a faulty manner, absolutely
yeah,
faulty, so that
yeah.
tomorrow everyone is going to be free. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was shocked to read about Kelvin Money was that it they did not even like convict him for even like they set him free, right? The prime
Mm-hmm.
accused. I think from what I read and understood, that they completely set him free. Like no one, like you said, nobody killed the Dalits, like, and they did not even raise a question that, okay, then who killed those 44 people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the tendency is that, the kind of narrative they always give whenever the Dalit dies is to indulge in some kind of massive victim blaming. I remember very
Yeah,
clearly,
yeah,
like even when people are not dead, like in 2012 in Dharmapuri in Tamil Nadu, so they were like caste Hindu hooligans belonging especially to, like dominant caste parties, and who set fire to about 300 homes. They were using Molotov cocktails and stuff like that. And I've written about it, and belonging to, dominant caste 1 years. And what they did was, they later the PMK actually just went and simply said, "Oh, the Dalits set fire to their own homes in order to get compensation." This is the kind of absolute gross victim blaming that takes place.
yeah, yeah.
So that's also part of, and then you have a certain media that also amplifies this kind of victim blaming. So yeah.
Yeah, it's uh, yeah. Dr. Meena, I was also wondering that in you did mention about casteism in academia. Also, I was just curious that did you like also faced challenges to get published, because it is also this that space is also sort of dominated by the dominant caste.
It's quite interesting actually, because like I met writers who've been Tamil writers, but I never met an Indian English writer until like I was myself a writer and going to some festival or the other. So like it's also, I think that's where the problem starts, because when you come from certain backgrounds, you don't necessarily access power or networks in the same way.
Yeah,
So obviously, had a lot of links to like Tamil. I could have met a lot of Tamil politicians or Tamil activists who are working for reservation rights and social justice. But just come, I think the entire English-speaking media functions at another level. So.
yeah,
So that's
yeah.
really a small intricate group. But I always think that I went with very small presses where Indian publication was concerned. So my first books of translation were published, one by Mandira Sen of Sri Samya, who's also the publisher for Kanchale as Why I'm Not a Hindu.
Yeah.
And so, she published both of Tirumalavan's books. And then the other publisher was, for my own poetry, was Anand, who was running, who was just started Navayana in 2010. So he published Miss Militancy. My first book was published by someone called Sunil Pulani, but he was a Malayali whom Kamala Das read my poetry and she liked it. And she said, "I know a little young friend, who's kind of into publishing." So he published a book. So again, but these were really, really tiny presses, So I don't think I got like a big break at any point, or, my first debut came from, any of the major
Hmm.
titles. So I think only with my novel, my agent managed to sell it to HarperCollins, and then I got published with Juggernaut, and then I got published again with Context. So yeah, I think with my fiction, I managed to really break into the big publishers league. But yeah, I think my most political work is always with the small press, and I think I have the greatest respect for the small press, because they put so much work into making you who you are.
Who you are? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so much important. Like, if you look at my work, like the novels are great, but it's not like the publisher has much to do with it, because it really comes to them in some form or the other, very ready, and it's still published in the UK. So even the editing and all of that is done by the editors in the UK. But here, in terms of I was also working on this small book on Ayyankali, which I co-wrote with another person, with other books. It's based in Calicut, and they were really small independent publishers. So I do think I have a great respect for independent publishers, and they really take on projects that no one else takes on. Like recently, I think my last book, it's about the Tamil tigresses and what they faced in the context of, after 2009, when there was a big genocide that happened, and these women were put into camps in Sri Lanka. So this
Hmm.
book was published by Navayana. It's not a lot of publishers will openly come and publish a book about, let's say, the Tamil tigers.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Hmm.
in that sense, I really think that it's not just a question of, if there's a question obviously of caste system and all that, but there's also really a question of what is your politics, and does the mainstream have space for that kind of politics? And I don't think the
Yeah.
mainstream has that space for that kind of politics at all. Like,
Hmm. So maybe it is less about sometimes it is not about where you are coming from, but it is more about what you are going to say, and will the mainstream is okay with what you're going to say.
I do think that that also plays a role. I'm sure that on the one hand, yeah, there's a certain type of stories that they cannot commodify.
Yeah.
And I do think that, irrespective of the background, like somebody could be an Adivasi, but not all Adivasis are treated in the same way by publishing houses. Of course, there is a
Hmm.
general way in which all of them would be kept out, but,
Yeah.
a more militant person, a more political person would be sent much more to the, like the margins than somebody who has an appropriately pleasing story to say. I think it's the same for all communities or, oppressed backgrounds, marginalized backgrounds, or, non-dominant background. So I do think that's quite an interesting story.
Hmm.
But and this is true all over the world, isn't it? Like all radical voices are not
Not
necessarily
heard. Yeah.
not heard or amplified in the same manner. So.
Yeah, and that is where I think social media has contributed a lot to, even in India, like in the anti-caste movement, social media has played a very good role in amplifying those voices, and we hearing more young people, more quickly the atrocities are also amplified, and
Mm-hmm,
the network is also built of the anti-caste voices.
mm-hmm.
I mean, we are also like a part of that small network that we are slowly building here. So in that way, I think social media has played a decent role. At least not it has not replicated it. Of course, it cannot replicate mainstream, but it has contributed a small drop in the ocean. Don't you think so?
Absolutely. I remember when, like when I was really young, I think 17 or something, and we were trying to, get a small literary, not literary, political, small magazine of about 60 pages. It was a bi-monthly magazine off the ground. So this was a project of the Dalit Media Network. They were based in Chennai. They published the Tamil magazine Dalit Murasil. They wanted to publish something called the Dalit in English, and with stories of atrocities, but also stories of heritage, stories of forgotten history, but also interviews with people like Gail Ombet or Anant Teltumte, and a lot of intellectuals. And I remember working there, bringing out two solid issues, one in March, April, and one in May, June. And I actually realized that, we would spend so much of effort and time and, combined, everybody putting their best, mind, energy, networks, contacts, hours of editing, hours of laying out, and we would print like 500 copies and try to get these to people. But today with social media, you have another entirely different kind of reach. Like you can
Yeah.
reach, it doesn't have to be such a struggle to reach 500 people, and I think the moment when, I think Facebook came to India in what, 2009, something like that. Before that, I think it really changed the nature of things, and how many people can you reach, how quickly with information, and how you can make them rally around. Of course, it doesn't really replicate the absolutely gorgeousness of a print magazine, but it does two things. Like it does, bring people together, it does get you heard, it does let you amplify things, it does let you raise your voices of protest. So I think, it's almost become like a necessary evil these days. So yeah, on the one hand, we have all of these Sangi goons there, and like a Hindu mafia. But on the other hand, you still
Yeah.
manage to do what you want to do. So.
Yeah, and obviously in the discourse is always this thing that that right wing has sort of monopolized social media, and it is their dominant space. But my contention is that once we often sort of not realize it, that it has even contributed to more diverse voices as well. It has done is it has truly democratized the system. Now you can you can just not just hear one part or one sort of idea or one sort of ideology, but also there are various of ideology. It's just you have to just shift your echo chamber. I think what that is a bigger problem, that they have made these echo chambers where you can't just shift them so easily. We are all part of some echo chambers, but the point is everyone now has a voice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Dr. Meena, I was also wondering, and I'll take
Oh
a
no,
step.
yes. By the way, you should stop calling me Dr. Meena all the time. Just call me Meena. That's fine. I,
Okay.
I I I put the doctor on my Twitter bio for a lot of reasons because this was during the time. This was a lot of women were reclaiming the fact that they were doctors,
Yeah, yeah,
and like they have to be addressed properly. And
yeah.
so I think that's one of that, but there's also the other thing, sometimes when you say things, you just don't get treated with the necessary gravitas that it should get treated with, because you're an academically qualified person. There's so much just looking down at you, because they just think you're a popular writer, and therefore what you say is not scholarly enough or
Yeah,
academic
yeah.
enough. And then you have to, like, no, I did all that. I did the same rigorous research training that you did. And I also think there's the other very unfortunate way in which patriarchy and misogyny work, in that if you happen to be like some kind of semi, I don't even say good looking, but arresting looking women, then what happens is people are like, oh, she's here because she's too cute.
Chase good. Yeah,
Yeah, she's taking shortcuts, and she just
yeah,
wants to.
yeah.
She just is a beautiful face, so everybody listens to it. And then you're like, no, no, I did a lot of thinking and writing and hard work. So please maybe respect, all these years of my hard work. Not that I believe in academics, but I sometimes feel the pressure to. I especially think for women and people from disadvantaged communities, that you constantly have to not only fight imposter, like everybody says you're fighting imposter syndrome on the inside. I don't think you're fighting it on the inside. You're actually fighting it because others think you're an imposter. So you have to, like, kind of lay down, like, what's your qualification all the time. Like, I think it's very dreadful, but it's really there.
Yeah, and more power to you, Meena, because I can only imagine as a man what you go through, and yeah, yeah, it's yeah, more power to you on that note. Dr. Meena, I'll also take a step back here, and
Sure.
yeah, and I wanted to ask this question: that what was it like to be being brought up in a anti-caste household, and like how was it different from probably your contemporaries and your peers and your friends? Uh,
I think it was like, so my parents had this anti-caste marriage, and like, on the one hand, my mom's family was like kind of accepting of the relationship. I think that is, they consented to the wedding, but they kind of possibly kept away all ties from my family. And actually, my mom likes to tell me an episode of what happened during her marriage. So she always tells me that. My dad had turned up for, it was an arranged marriage. It was also anti-caste, because the people who arranged their marriage were, Periyaris. And my mom says to me that, on the day of her marriage, she saw her real father-in-law and her real mother-in-law, and she was in for like a major culture shock, because these were not the two people whom she had seen during the bride ceremony. So during the bride ceremony, my father had made his Tamil professor pretend to be his father, and his landlady pretend to be his mother,
oh,
because they looked like sophisticated types, like they looked well read and educated. And my mom was, brought up in Chennai, and she was like, she went to Stella Maris. So she was like slightly urban, educated woman. And, my father's coming from this real village. And I think possibly he was, he got married on this massive lie, possibly because, afraid that if my mom saw who my father's parents were, the family would just reject the wedding. And I completely understand where my father was coming from, because people really go by appearances. I also think it took an immense amount of courage for my mother to still go ahead and marry my father. And so like, that's the kind of background that we're talking about. Like, and like, he grew up in an orphanage almost all of his life. um, and is the first generation learner. It was all of this. And then my mother, on the other hand, she was born in a family of 10 children. So it was quite an interesting, but they were also very, in many senses, intellectual and political themselves. I never realized, for instance, like what my mom's work means in terms of her struggle at the IIT. But recently I was thinking about just in terms of dates and timelines, and the Mandal Commission, the Indra Sohani case, all that is from 1991. The Indra Sohani case is 1993, I think. And my mom was actually going to court in 1997 or 1996 and asking for reservation for OBCs. And you look at that, you're like, this is great, like, this is immense. This is a
yeah,
denial. But you don't realize then, because you're a little girl. I'm like, I was 12, 13 years old, and you don't realize what you're caught up in. And now you realize that Mandal Commission was like so phenomenally important for social justice for
Yeah.
public in this country. And so I think that aspect of it, just growing up around them was important. But also why I wanted to say this about the fact that both families alienated them, and especially I think my mom's family. And then actually my mom often tells me that my grandmother and others saw me only when we went to a family funeral of one of her siblings, and it was already a year and a half or two at the time. Like they never even came for the birth or something. And then you realize that this is what happens to people who intermarry or have these anti-caste marriages, who step out of caste, because you don't necessarily belong to each of the families, you don't necessarily belong to each of the castes. So you're not both this and that, but actually you're neither this nor that.
Neither this nor that.
So
Correct. Yeah.
you so you also, I think, parents like that also try to surround themselves with progressive people because they need a social network, they need a social circle, they need like what family cannot provide, what caste and community cannot provide. They need that to be provided in other ways, which is also why I think compared to a lot of people, I just managed to. Everybody I met was highly politicized, highly aware, and like into debating, like different type of people. So I realized that yeah, it was like it was amazing, like just to be growing up in that space. I owe so much to it, which I now realize when I think back about it.
Yeah. Your mom is an inspiration. Would love to get her on my podcast someday.
Sure, I'll tell her.
Yes. And yeah, you're right. And endogamy is ultimately preserving the caste system. And but it's not just in dominant caste, but it is in all caste groups. And it is just very weird for me to even just contemplate it, that uh, you know how this whole idea has prevailed across different caste groups, whether they are dominant caste or marginalized caste. That it has always been there. uh, I think Indians are married to this idea of endogamy. I mean, they just want endogamy to prevail for a very long time. Don't you
No,
think so?
I don't know if it's. I would disagree here and think that marginalized castes necessarily want that. Want that.
Hmm.
I think there would be certainly a much more democracy there. But also, what happens when a person of a marginalized caste, or especially like let's say a Dalit caste, marries somebody who is uh, from the caste Hindu system, and they're often punished with death, isn't it? Like you have so many honor killings happening. So when the cost that you're paying for love, you're paying the price with your life, then that's the like the biggest deterrent that there is, isn't it? So
Hmm.
it's not like people are thinking that this is bad, or we are going to marry in our own caste. I really think that whoever wants to do it, and this is something that's now started to happen across communities. When women are marrying, not even like not necessarily Dalits, but even when they're marrying like other Shudra caste, for instance, in Tamil Nadu, there's all of this, like the fact that women making decisions for themselves is getting
Hmm.
punished by death. So these are covered up, like honor killings get covered up as murders, they get covered up as suicides, they get covered up as cases of suspicious death. But so when they are giving you it's very different. If the only problem or the only aspect is, oh, I'm not going to talk to you for a month, or I'm going to disown you in my will or something like that. It's not like they're even giving some of these lighter threats. Like the threat is like, I'm just gonna kill you. And I think that that shows the extent to which this craziness, this absolute horrible, horrendous craziness prevails, isn't it?
Hmm. Absolutely. And and Meena, switching gears a bit, and what do you make up of a very broader question is, what do you make up of the current political climate of the country right now?
I'm really, really absolutely thrilled that they had this absolute, basically someone smashed them in Kerala and Tamil Nadu and West Bengal. So I'm very proud and happy about those results. And I think that the more and more that Modi's system gets exposed, there's no way they are winning 2020.
Four.
Four in through democratic means, absolutely, because they're going to be standing up exposed in front of people, and it's going to take so much time to undo them. So the work, I think, the task at hand is to get the opposition in order. It's to know that like I think every single Indian household has had either a death or a hospitalization or some grievous thing because of corona or because of COVID. And
Yeah.
all that their position has to do is to channelize this rage, to channelize this grief, to channelize this utter political orphanhood, and to give people direction and to see that, this is the end, this is the beginning of the end of the BJP in this country. So, and the Sangh Parivar also. So I think that, on the next couple of years should be spent in politicizing people and in, having a solid opposition. And like you look at the number of protests that are there, whether it's the farmers protest or whether it's the, the trade unions protest. Like I think on last November 26th they went on the largest general strike in history. Farmers have been protesting for like 6 months and more now. More than 300 have died. Like it's all people led. Like at what point are political parties also going to start mobilizing people? Obviously now we have COVID and we have lockdowns, but at some point there has to be, a kind of, direction giving and a kind of consolidation against the BJP on a national level, I believe, too, because they're dangerous. It's not like, this parties in power. It's also about how dangerous they are.
Hmm. And to what extent can they go?
Yes, and to what extent would they go? Like, is there anything that will stop them? Like.
Yeah, and even that's a very important, interesting question. It was an interesting point. I was just before our conversation, I was discussing with a friend who has seen Saddam Hussein's regime, and he has lived in that part of the world, and and he was just making a prophecy, and he is saying that what will happen now. You will see Modi declaring emergency very soon. And to my mind, I mean, I said that it's literally preposterous that he may do that, but his feeling was that he may actually do that, and he may actually cut all the news channels, cut all the anti BJP narrative that is there, regain the narrative, and ensure that people are only looking at the good stuff that he's doing. And the point is not that he may end up doing this or not, but the point is people believe that he is capable of doing that.
Yeah, that's how much. Yeah, that's a kind of that's where he's led us to believe, isn't it? You can't fault someone for this belief.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a I've heard this emergency story for the last since the last lockdown. Actually, people were like, he's going to declare an emergency. People are like, he's not even going to conduct elections in these states. So naturally, like sometimes you're kind of relieved because that's how what we expect of this regime in so many ways. But I also don't think that the danger of Modi is just an emergency. It's also the complete erosion of so many values. Values of secularism or values of even things like food security. We are thinking of ourselves as a kind of welfare state. Like these, the poor people should get food. They should the public distribution system. But the problem with Modi's government is that all this is set to go. So in so many aspects, it's even more dangerous than COVID because the deaths are not immediate. They're not like in 1 2. The deaths are going to happen over time. There's going to be stunting. There's going to be wasting. There's going to be starvation. But people are going to be dying because of the disastrous policies of this government, and which doesn't make them any less culpable.
Yeah, it has the old welfare system of the Congress consensus has sort of replaced by the new welfare system, which is now more about subsidies and gas connections and all different, more tangible sort of welfareism. I don't know how success it is politically, definitely successful, but how much it is gonna benefit people in the long run, I am not sure about it. uh, yeah. And do you often think that Ambedkarism and Periyarism is sort of is at odds at Hindutva?
Oh, no, definitely they're not at odds. They are the enemies of Hindutva. If you have to fight a Hindutva, you have to embrace Ambedkarism and Periyarism because they call out what Hindutva stands for. Whether it's Ambedkar or Periyar, they have a very clear cut approach in terms of how it wants to uphold the inequality among the castes as central to the doctrine, and also how they want to degrade women, which is again central to the Hindutva doctrine. And so both Ambedkar and Periyar were excellent feminists of their time
Hmm.
because they never looked away from the women question, and they never looked away from the fact that
Never. Yeah.
and they never looked away from the fact that this women question was innately tied to the religion question.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that in terms of fighting Hindutva, we have to we need to look at these great people and what they had to say.
Hmm. And which brings me to my next question is, do you think this is the reason why we are seeing Bhima Koregaon?
I, I do believe. I think that if you look at Bhima Koregaon, and you look at why the people are in prison. They are all the major intellectuals of this country. So, and until today, who write so much, about Kherlanji, about atrocities, about the dangers of Hindu fascism, about the laws of an Ambedkarite socialism. So there's all of this with just on, and then there's Varavara Rao, and then there's Sudha Bharatwaj, who talks about Adivasi rights, goes to court against corporates who want to take land away from mining and stuff like that. And she's taken on all the big corporates. And then you look at all of the prisoners, Dr. Hani Babu from Delhi University, who fights for reservation. So they have, it's an entirely non-homogeneous group of people who are stellar activists in their own right, who are
Hmm.
completely exposing Hindutva, whether it's on the reservation policy, whether it's on land grab, whether it's on corporate collusion, whether it's on data surveillance, whether it's on crony capitalism. I don't know, like every single aspect of, and these people are all like clubbed together in this one mega massive case. So I think that and such a tragedy. Like today, I was reading it's a Supreme Court judgment on the 7th of May, which says that thousands of prisoners should be sent out of prison because prisons are getting congested, and we have to decongest the prisons to prevent COVID. And in Tamil Nadu last year, they released 4,000 prisoners. But nobody is speaking about political prisoners. Nobody is saying these people were absolutely framed. They were framed because the evidence was actually planted through malware on Rona Wilson's computer. It was not evidence that he ever accessed. There's absolute foolproof, evidence that nobody even opened these files. That he never had the chance to, like even open, modify, download, or do anything with these files. And why is he in jail? And why is everyone else in jail based on planted files? Like so, often I like to say this thing. I and Jignesh also wrote this piece saying there is no case, release and common say it. And I kind of think that should become
Yeah,
a
I read
slogan,
it.
like there's like this it's such a they're like I would not even call them prisoners at this point. Actually, I was talking to Anand's daughter and I was telling her, why do we call them prisoners? They are like basically captives. Prisoner is someone who's been taken to prison because they committed something. These people have not committed anything, and there's not even a suspicion of they committed something. They're just held there like they're captives, like hostages. I don't know how else to look at the Bhima Koregaon prisoners.
Hmm. Hmm. And uh, also, what is this idea that somehow anti-intellectualism is on the rise, where intellectuals or people who are highly literate are seen as
Oh,
the enemy of the state.
no one, Ditya. I beg to disagree with you. There is a kind of intellectualism which is very much on the rise. That is, like tomorrow, he will be the greatest celebrated intellectual if you say that cow urine is the solution for cancer, for
Hmm.
leukemia, for COVID. It's the answer for brain tumor, and like whatever erectile dysfunction, bladder retention, incontinence, whatever you can think of. If you say, and you can scientifically write some shit to prove that that is the case, and that kind of dabba intellectualism is going to work very nicely. So
Hmm. Hmm.
you'll be the best friends with the regime, and you'll possibly be part of the National Science Commission or something like that. So it's not like there's anti-intellectualism. There is an I don't know, pseudo-intellectualism or very dangerous Hindu revivalism that's going on at the moment. The belief that everything is there in Asian knowledge systems. Or you look at, for instance, the national education policy. So the national education policy is basically even making a case that There has to be some kind of hereditary education. So hereditary education means nothing but caste system in India.
Mm-hmm.
So there is such a rightward trend. And I recently was actually talking to another friend of mine who told me that in the BA history syllabus in this country, the BJP has gone and rewritten to such an extent that they have put the Vedas as part of a historical text.
Hmm.
And that's like, this is so dreadful. Like, when you start looking at what they have been doing to the system, it's so dreadful. Like, how long is it going to take for us to undo what they have done?
Undo, yeah. It's gonna take years. Mm. But Meena, do you also see a ray of hope for our political prisoners slash captives? Do you think, or they are in for a very long night?
Oh, no, this is a question that I desperately ask all my friends. I'm like, what's going to bring them out? Should Rahul Gandhi make a lot of noise? Like, what is it that's going to, like, because we have tried everything, like, people are trying to get a united opposition. We're trying to get a united cross party MPs, signing off and dashing off letters. We're trying to get press meets. We are trying to do everything that can be done. They're trying to do the legal challenge. We managed to get, I mean, Indra Jaising managed to get a bail of 6 months on medical conditions for whatever Rao.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
there are a lot of international campaigns going on. The UN is speaking about them. The US State Department is speaking about them. So everyone's, basically wrapping them, but nothing seems to be hurting Modi and, Shah. So the question is, what has to be done? A lot of people are saying, oh, I sometimes compare this with what happened to the Prevention of Terrorism Act, the POTA. So in POTA, I think, at least as a Tamil person, my experience is that there were like star prisoners like MDMK's Vaiko, who was, arrested for the longest time. And the political opposition actually made it part of their manifesto that if they come to power, they're going to scrap this. And I think that that's the kind of thing that should actually go into the Congress manifesto, saying that if we come into power, we are going to scrap UAPA and release all prisoners under the UAPA, which is one of the ways in which we at least can envisage that in 2024 these people will be out, and that's the latest, like.
Hmm. Yeah. No, but Congress manifesto did had sedition, that it'll remove sedition charges and etc. in the last manifesto, but it
Yeah, but they
didn't.
didn't win. I'm talking about,
Yeah,
what's on your manifesto when you win, because
a
that is,
winning manifesto should have it. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
yeah, but do you see hope from Congress?
I do believe that, every time we've had a section of, like, yesterday there was a statement where individual Congress MPs have signed from Kerala in support of Hani Babu. I remember that Shashi Tharoor once spoke about this issue in some press meet called by the PUCL, and he's constantly helping people, the prisoners' families. So there's a lot of, like, individual Congress commitment. I think it should just become a much more broader national issue. They should just give a statement on these prisoners, I believe, just to raise the heat on Modi, because, it's not about anybody's political affiliation, it's not about anybody's beliefs. There's no Maoist links. It's all about, like, who planted the evidence and why are these people in jail based on planted evidence.
Yeah, yeah. No, but when I said hope, I meant, do you see hope from them winning 2024 or forming a winning coalition in 2024?
Oh, I think we all have to be optimistic. We all have to, we all have to, like, kind of write the history of our lives. Like, we cannot say Modi is going to win again, because if we let him win after the amount of blood that's on his hands, the kind of deaths that are happening now, and the absolute mismanagement, but also what he has done to India since he came to power as Modi 2.0, I think that, history will not forgive us for playing such a collaborative role. Like, I really think that it's up to us, and I believe in people. I believe that, people are very political and can be politicized, and they can also be de-Hindutvaized. They can, like a kind of deworming or something, and, they can join, like, the opposition to this very fascist corporate Hindu governance that's going on at the moment.
Yeah, and you are also vocal, Meena. Do you also fear sometimes that the regime may come after you because they are very active on Twitter and they are very sensitive to the criticism on Twitter?
Oh, I just block a lot of these people on Twitter these days, and yeah, I think that sometimes you do manage to. It's crazy how Twitter works as well, because over the years they have built up this network of shell accounts and fake IDs and troll accounts. So, and the way they do is like they kind of mass report your account to have it suspended. And I remember, for instance, that I wrote something and I got more than 8 million hits over 2 days time. I never get that kind of traffic on my Twitter page, but this was just basically people mass reporting me to have my account suspended. And then
Hmm.
you realize that that's how organized they are, because it can't only be bots doing it.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
so much organized activity as well. So
It's a
yeah,
machinery.
because the thing is, there's so much criminal. The entire thing about the Hindutva project is, as much as it's a project of hate, it's also a criminal project. So it takes so much hate and like organized activities like this to just scuttle voices. So yeah, no, I don't know if I should say I'm afraid. I'm more worried, I would say, about what's happening in general to everybody. Because, for instance, just even with the Bhima Koregaon case that you made the time to speak about and ask me for my opinion. One of those things is that they have now interviewed more than 50 people from 6 or 7 states across the country, which means that they can make more arrests as well, like, so it's not only going to be Bhima Koregaon 16, but they can make many more arrests.
Yeah, they will. I think they will go to small time activists, people who who have a decent reach or decent following. Maybe some who are doing their own regional activism. Uh, they will also probably go for them, and it's very interesting. I was in touch with Henny Babu. I sort of requested him to come on the podcast, and it was just like 2 or 3 days after he was arrested. It was very sad.
Oh
uh,
no.
yeah.
Okay, it was
Uh,
nice for me
yeah, yeah.
talking
Thank
to
you,
you.
Mina.
And
Uh,
yeah, it's going to be nearly midnight, so yeah, I must disappear. But thank you for having me here, and uh,
yes, yes. Thank you so much for taking out the time. It means a lot. Wish you all the best for your future endeavors,
okay,
and
take care.
take care. Bye bye.